Hi, I'm Jack Garner, and I'm thrilled to be here with Jack Haldoupis as we celebrate his 35 years at Blackfriars and the fact that you're leaving Blackfriars now after those 35 years, and you're going back to what you started at. A lot of people may not realize that. You made a name for 35 years in theater, a name that's very justified because you do really wonderful work. And some people may be surprised to learn that it was not your first career choice.
No, it wasn't. I started out to be a painter, a fine artist, and I got involved in the theater, and one thing, one show led to another show, and then all of a sudden it was a full-time job. And 35 years later, and I kind of put my painting career as a fine artist kind of on the shelf, and I'm going back to my first instinct of who I thought I was as a creative soul, and I'm still going to be designing for the theater around different things, hopefully all over the country, that I'd like to do that. But on a local level, what I'm going to be doing is working in my studio. I just rented a studio this morning.
Wonderful.
A new space in the city that I'm real excited about. So.
How did you get into the arts in the first place? What was your early background?
My early background in fine art really started, I was kind of a strange kind of kid. I'm a strange adult now, but but I excelled in the visual arts, and actually I'm going back to the very, very, very early on. I was a very slow reader. And my teachers couldn't figure out what would spark me to get me to get my academics. And they found out that Jack didn't like to read the books that they had, so they gave me books on making puppets. And all of a sudden I was reading. And I excelled at a very, very early age, and when I was in grammar school, I had a wonderful art teacher. His name was Wayne Fish, who had just graduated.
This is in Webster?
This is in Webster, right.
Okay.
And he had just graduated from art school. He was a wonderful visual artist, a printmaker, and a wonderful, as I would call, gorgeous drawings. And he was a young guy that was single, and that he came to my parents. We struck up a friendship with him, and he became part of the family. And he came twice a week and had dinner with the family, and then afterwards he gave me art lessons. And in exchange for dinner, we were always the Haldoupises were always really fast eaters, and we were waiting for him to be he's the slowest eater in the world. And I couldn't wait to get down to the basement that he would teach me. And basically, what he did was he taught me what he just learned in college. And so I had a kind of a college education of background in perspective and shading and color theory very, very early. And so by the time I was in high school, I had already started my professional career, and I was the youngest member of the National Watercolor Society that ever had been elected to actually have your NWS after your name. And I had won major awards in museum shows all over the country. And I won the most, I actually kind of blocked this out for years. I didn't even remember that it happened to me. And then I thought back about the fact that I don't have a degree. But I did go to RIT for a short time. When I graduated from high school, I had won the most prestigious Scholastic Art Award in the United States for a portfolio of a body of work when I was in my senior in high school. And the award was any school you pick anywhere in the country for 4 years for free, completely paid. So I could have gone to Yale, I could have gone to anywhere, and I chose to go to RIT because I wasn't really sure whether or not I wanted to go to school. And about halfway, maybe 3/4 through the year, my teachers were like, well, you were like the top scholarship student in the United States, and you chose to come here for fine art, and you're getting like B's, and like, what is that about? I said, because I'm doing these things like 10 minutes before class, these exercises, and I already heard it all. My earlier training had kind of gotten me to the point where, and so they said, bring in your portfolio. And what happened was they looked at my work and they said, well, you know what it is, you've already started a professional career and you're doing graduate level work. What we could do is, or you're doing professional level work, or what we could do is we could transfer you to the graduate program. You'd still have to do all your academic stuff, but we eliminate all of the art classes. And she asked me the question and she said, do you want to teach? I said no. And she said, well, she got in trouble for this, the teacher that was at RIT. And she said, quite honestly, what is a degree going to, if you're not going to teach, because she said, what we can do is we can teach you what you know, so you can teach it to someone else. She said, if you instinctively do it and you've already started your career and you're in the same shows that I am, you're competing against me in the art world already, and you've already started this, she said, what is it going to get you? You're not going to go to New York City and get a show because you have a degree. doesn't get you a one-man show in a gallery. It doesn't. It's a kind of an interesting, kind of a world that it doesn't. Degrees don't really mean anything in the visual arts. Your work speaks for it. And so I decided to leave RIT, and I immediately started my career, and I had shows all over the country, and I was selling my work for thousands of dollars, and then all of a sudden I got involved in doing the theater, and that kind of just went on.
Let's talk about that. How did that happen? What was that first?
I was out in Webster, and I just got with a group of people, and I had designed. Of course, I had been involved in high school shows. When I was in high school, and I just had this inkling of the idea that I would love to design something, and I also had, I said, well, I could direct it too. I knew nothing about it. I think probably the first 5 or 6 or maybe even 10 years when I first started out, I used my design aesthetic so much about the direction. I think I learned so much, good actors taught me about directing.
So you were like placing figures in the landscape that you
it was like I made these wonderful little models, and I moved people around like chess pieces, and I made pretty stage pictures.
Oh wait, you're supposed to say something? What?
Yeah. It wasn't until about 15 years ago probably, or 20 years ago probably, that I started to really understand exactly what how to. I think I always kind of instinctively knew how to read a script and figure out visually, and I still always come at a production through a visual way.
Right.
I read a book once about Hal Prince, a wonderful Broadway director, who said that you can't really direct a show unless he knows what it looks like, and he calls it or a concept, and he calls it the motor of the show. Mm-hmm. And I've always kind of used that. I kind of took that from that book that I read of his, and I always say, what gets me to point A? What's going to drive the show, and what does it look like? Because it could look like anything. And if it's going to have a unique voice, and it's going to have a way, so the combination of not only what it looks like, but exactly how does the show move. And I've come to the way of staging a production, which is creating like what I call, it's almost like a board game. And I work with the actors, and I say, well, this is what it can do, and this is like the rules of the game. So it's like a board game. And here are the doors, and here are the entranceways, and this is the furniture, and we're going to make, such as in Violet that I just did, these few benches are going to turn into all the different locales. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have to work with. It's not like, you can have anything. These are what we have to work with. And now let's play.
And it's also in the world of the theater as opposed to making a film where you have the whole outdoors to play with. You have to create the world in a confined area with fairly confined stuff.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's one thing I've always loved about the theater, as much as I may be a movie man, and I am, of course, is that I love the use of imagination. You really need the audience to imagine things, and you have to suggest those imaginations.
Right, and I've done some film work, and I find it to be, the people talk about, I don't really think in the theater there's no realism in the theater. It is all an illusion, and while film is an illusion too, I think audiences accept, and that's why I think things are so powerful that happen live. Obscenities, nudity on stage, things that you would see in a film just kind of seem like I'm in the darkened theater and it's happening on the screen, but it's not, it might seem very real, but yet you're not witnessing it. Right. In the same way that it's live. Right. And if you do a production of Equus and somebody strips clothes right, you're 4 feet away from them. There's a whole nother level of intimacy, let's say, to being in a theater and experiencing something that I like to call, that to me it's like it's a shared dream, between the actors and the audience. And I think that's. It is very, very powerful, and I have found that's why people get riled by the theater sometimes, because it is so immediate, and it is so ultimately the experience. While I don't believe in realism in scenery or realism that the
kitchen sink theater.
Kitchen sink, yeah. And I certainly in my career never was very interested in that when the door opens up and you can see the bathroom and there's running water. And I go and matter of fact, I kind of stayed away from plays and musicals that had a lot of that kind of thing, because I feel like we live with that all day long. Molding. Big sets with lots of staircases with lots of clutter. Usually what people mean by elaborate sets is clutter. Lots of stuff.
It's
heavy, yeah, it's big architecture, lots of molding. But ultimately, people don't really respond to that in the same way as they do poetic kind of lyricism, visual lyricism in the theater, because to see something, or like to see the outdoors brought indoors. It's one of my favorite things to do. Matter of fact, all through my career, if I could find a way to place a play in an outdoor setting, even though if it's indoors, I would.
Right.
And I just, because I find it to be the ultimate in the ultimate magic trick is to somehow bring outside inside.
And it's a magic trick performed in large part by the art designer, which is your original thing. Right.
That's my background. Sure, it's to be visual and to be and to utilize a space and in a hopefully a creative way that brings something new to the material and allows the actor to be able to play.
Was it more difficult then for you, Jack, to sort of get more deeply into the text aspect of the play? In other words, what the guy wrote.
No, I actually do still start with that. I mean, that's been fairly easy for me. That I can't put something on a play that's not there. What I can do is by being the artistic director of Blackfriars, particularly for the shows that I directed, which I directed so many of them. I could tell whether or not I could direct a play 3 pages into the script. If I can't, matter of fact, I've always said I hate to read scripts. I still hate to read scripts, and I'm thrilled that it's not a major part of my job anymore to read them, because they're not meant to be read. They're meant to be played, and they take a lot of work and a lot of imagination to read a play, because it's not novel. The author doesn't write it like, and now we'll explain the room. It's like, and you have to remember who's talking now, and who is that character. And there's a lot of things that you have to imagine that a play is happening that is completely unlike reading a novel. And you have to invest so much time into it. And usually if it doesn't speak to me right from the beginning, I know I could never direct this play. It might be something that's for another director to direct, and I certainly have had a lot of guest directors who do wonderful work. But if it didn't speak to me, I couldn't do it. If I couldn't imagine it, if I couldn't kind of hold my attention and imagine how these people would be moving in space, I just went like, this is not a play for me. I can't figure it out.
What would be your greatest hits? What would be your personal, the ones that have given you the most satisfaction, the one you said, well, I'm glad I did that?
Some of the earlier Sondheim things that I did, just because he's such a genius and the work is so rewarding and challenging and difficult. The production that I did very early on of 2 of them specifically. The first time I did Sunday in Park with George, certainly his masterpiece, I think the finest theater piece ever written for the musical stage is Sweeney Todd. There's not a moment in that you could cut or that you would want to change. It's so tight. And our production was stellar. So that, and then earlier on there were some shows at Xerox where there were some very magical shows. Once again, another Sondheim show, our production of Into the Woods was kind of groundbreaking in the sense that it was a fairly new show. I was one of the first people to do it. I was the first theater in the United States to incorporate our little world. I knew somebody that knew Sondheim, and they wouldn't release it to me. And I went through Sondheim's secretary, and I got a letter from Sondheim saying, I still have the letter framed in my studio that says you can go ahead and use the song. And there was that. We did a wonderful. That I always remember really fondly, a production, Big River. That many people who saw that, and this was another show that was done at Xerox, said it could have been the national tour. And I totally believe. I've seen clips of it still to this day, and I look at it, the visuals and the quality of the performers and everything that, from top to bottom, every aspect of that show, it could have been the tour.
I believe, by the way, that show's ready for a revival.
I
saw the original on Broadway, and I loved it, and all this interest in Mark Twain and Huck Finn and all that stuff. It'd be really fun to see a new version of that.
Right, yeah, it's a great piece. I always wanted to do a show. I never went far enough to research the rights for it, but I think somebody should do a Roger Miller songbook show, because I think he has so many fun songs that would translate to being
story songs. There's
story songs, and they would relate. They would be kind of like the Harry Chapin show. I did a wonderful show called Lies and Legends.
Melanie show.
Right, the Melanie and the Record Man. But let me think of other shows specifically that I did a production in the Lawn Street Theater of Kiss of the Spider Woman that was very special. It was something that. It was probably a turning point for me, where it was so originally, the staging was so me, because it was not in any way like the Broadway production. It captured the feeling of the Broadway production, but the way it was staged and the way I was forced to problem solve how to do a show behind bars. I had created these tall chairs that the prison mates would turn around, and they were wedges. And there were just enough of them and there was an upper level, and towards the end of the first act, when Aurora does the big number where she's riding in a cage as a bird, all of these tall chairs came together and created a round cage that she was inside of. And they were the exact same chairs that you had been looking at that people had turned and used as bars. There were these tall PVC pipes that turned around and that they could sit on them and they could stand on them, and they created all different configurations within the jail. And it was Nicolette Hart had come back. She had already started her professional career, and she was living in Nashville at the time, and she came back and was Aurora and for me, and that was very, very special.
Are you happy are you content that Violet is your sponsor?
Thrilled because it's a show that I have such a history with, going back with Michael Park, who's the two-time Emmy Award-winning actor from As the World Turns, is from Rochester and was a long time, he was our Cinderella's prince in Into the Woods, and when I did It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, he played Superman, and so before he turned to equity, he had done so many shows with Blackfriars. We were kind of his training, because he didn't go to school for theater, he kind of did Blackfriars. He was like the Blackfriars University of training. And then he immediately got his equity card, and he's worked ever since. He's steadily a Broadway actor and film and television actor. And he originated the role of Monty, the white soldier in Violet, off Broadway. And he was there in the process of when the show was written, and he did the workshop, and then he opened in the show. And he was here opening night for our production of Violet. I had seen him do it twice. I saw him do it in the original production of Playwrights Horizons off Broadway, and then they did a concert version of it when they opened the new theater for Playwrights Horizons on Theater Row. They did a concert version of all their major musicals, and he came back and he did it. I saw him do it then, and I always loved the show, and it was on the bucket list. And it was not actually, hadn't made totally the decision. I had been thinking about it for the last couple of years. But it just wound up being that it was my last show, and it's very special to me, and I love the score, and we do have some exceptionally fine performers in very small roles that I know for a fact are doing it because it's my last show and they wanted to be in it. So it made, but as you know, that's what makes a show.
Sure.
If you want a really, really great show, you make it so that the person who's playing the butler could stand forward and be the lead.
Sure.
And that's, and that in essence is what I've tried to always describe what Blackfriars is as a professionally oriented community theater versus an equity theater. And then I always say that if you're going to an equity theater and they're doing a murder mystery and the butler says dinner is served, they do it in a nice way and they look great, and that person could go on to the lead, and they probably have a list of credits a mile long, and they're probably up in the dressing room going like, I hate this, I can't stand playing this role, but I'm happy to work.
Right.
At Blackfriars, excuse us if maybe the person who's playing the butler, hopefully they look good, they say the lines fine, they say dinner served, the audience goes, well, he looks like a butler, but they're not like thinking, no, that person probably is not going to step in to the lead. I'm not going to get somebody to do that in one of our productions. And that's really what the difference is. It's certainly not in the leads. The leads people I've had so many people that have been in Blackfriars shows that they did a Blackfriars show, and 2 months later they were on Broadway, and I'm going like, well, they didn't automatically get so much better in those 2 months, that they were all of a sudden in a Broadway show than when they were with us. Talent is talent. So,
I suspect, based on your talent, that you could have gone anywhere else. You could have moved on, and you could have gone to New York, and you could have whatever.
Maybe.
You never know. I don't know. You don't know. But you did, I assume, choose by choice to stay here.
I did. I did make. Is this part of the chapter in my life? I did make a life in the theater, and I'm proud of that. And it also allowed me. I do know enough people that I know quite a few people that have went on and really made it, and I know people that have made it and still struggle, and I know people that have moved to a big city and never worked again. Never got work. I created my own projects. I did shows that only I would want to do. I had boards all through the years, but some of them have been with me a long time. Other ones are new people, but I always said, let's jump off a cliff. They would go, okay, if you want to do it, we believe in you. And there's something so wonderful as a theater artist to have that freedom and that that support to be able to do it. And I, of course I always wonder, like, what if? And who knows, but there might be, I'm giving up directing for now because I've basically decided I don't think I would ever direct again unless it was a professional production. I think I've kind of said everything that I would want to say, and I've kind of done that. As I said, I'm going to continue to design, so that will still be part of me. But the idea of Friday nights at 8 o'clock and in all those rehearsal times, in rehearsals every night. I would love to direct a show where it was like you rehearse during the daytime. It's a job. And I have such respect for the actors that do it. I've often said to the actors, even actors who've been in my shows, wonderful, wonderful people have said, "Oh, I'd love to do this for keep doing it." And I've told them, you can't. You can do it because your adrenaline and your talent and your desire is so strong, but you are basically doing double work. It is not designed to be a full-time actor to go get to the theater at 6 o'clock and then leave at midnight after you take your makeup off and wind down. That is a full-time job.
So they got day jobs.
They have day jobs, and they can't maintain it. That's the number one thing, is that if they could maintain it, if they could sleep in, or maybe
sleep at all.
Right.
What do you think about the acting pool here? Is it exceptional?
I think it's phenomenal, and I know for a fact that I know so many people that have done well that are from Rochester that it is actually, I've gone into the dressing rooms onto a Broadway show and been introduced to other people, and there's such a connection to the Rochester pool of actors that it is actually, on more than one occasion, people have said to me in the dressing room in a Broadway theater, "What's in the water up there that you could turn out that many people could come from?" And I think it's training. I think it starts in the high schools. And it certainly starts in the local theaters. That Blackfriars has been a big part of a lot of people's career. That it was treated as it was professional theater, and they did professional level work, and they were given the tools to do professional level work. We believed very strongly about the quality of the sets and the costumes and the props. And while we had a good time, we're not a theater about going out drinking afterwards. I'm not saying that we don't go out drinking. But it happens after the show, none of it's happening while we're rehearsing.
No, you're serious.
Very serious. It's very, very serious.
You must be happy, I assume, with the move down to this facility.
I love this space. I grew very quickly to adapt to a thrust stage. I was so worried about it because all of my experience had been in a proscenium theater. I'd been in different size theaters, from everything from our stint at the School of the Arts, where we had a great big fly system and lots of wings and we could wagon things in and out, to the times at Xerox where there was a fly system but you had to kind of rig things, to the Lawn Street space, which was basically a shell, beautiful space, but and I did some great shows there. But I worried about how to move actors into the space until I realized that all those years of what I was doing in a proscenium theater, that was unnatural movement. Because you were always trying to turn out, and you placed furniture in a bizarre, rooms not designed that way with the couch facing out like that. Nobody would do that. Here you can actually have a couch with its back to a part of the audience, and I have. And it becomes how you move around it. What I did find in the new space is there are certain plays. I always joke, a play we had done in the old theater. You wouldn't do the gin game. Because it's like, if you're really going to just plop yourself down and play cards, probably this is not a good space for that, because someone's going to see your back way too long. But if it's a play that's going to move around, it's a great space to address yourself to the audience and to make natural choices as a body in space. You feel like you want to move in that direction, well then do that. If it's natural to move that way.
As an audience goer in this community for 45 years, the thing I love most about this space is that I think this is the most intimate theater I have ever been in. You are right there. If I wanted to, I wouldn't want to, of course, but if I wanted to, I could trip an actor.
Right.
And it's that close, and I love that intimacy, and I think you get even more involved than you normally can if you're not down a level and or worried that they're going to fall off the stage or whatever.
Yeah, and one of the things that I loved about the space too, one of the hunting for this building was horrific. I had seen so many different spaces. There were possibilities that could have maybe been, but to find something that had height for the lighting. Our grid here is spectacular of the rigging and the things that can be done, and how it plays out as far as as the intimacy, and it's such a strong connection to the actor, to the audience. But mostly for me, as somebody that's strong visuals, it's not tiny. The actual acting space that we're on is larger than Xerox. There's actually more square footage of place to be.
Because it comes out.
But people have asked me, are there shows that you wouldn't put in here? And I said, absolutely. We used to do a thing, we had a motorized turntable. Some stuff we're too close to an audience that seems silly. To have some motorized thing turn around, the sets turn around. What works really well in here is to have the actors, you need something move, have the actor moving. I don't have people dressed in black coming out schlepping things around. I have it moved around and by the actors. But what was important to me was that the set was still large enough that I could still do something, I could still do scenery. I could still have an aesthetic so that it wasn't a postage size stamp little, so it's intimate for the audience and intimate for the actor and the audience to interact, but yet still visually you could be bold. So, but there are, I did a production of Ragtime in the old theater on Lawn Street that worked quite well, and it was, it was kind of clever the way it was done. It was miniaturized, obviously, and had a few less people than the Broadway production, but that I wouldn't have done in here because it would have been the vocals and that many people on stage belting out a number would just seem silly. Mm-hmm. So there are choices of a good, like a 16 cast member show is as big as you want it to be in here. That it doesn't need to, that seems very, very full, and you can dress the stage with actors with, and it seemed very populated.
Do you have any concern, Jack, about jumping into the abyss with this change?
Well, of course you do. I mean, there's always the worry that I have to pay my health insurance. There are certain things. One of the great things about it is though I've always been in the arts, and the money has been, sometimes it was here and sometimes it wasn't, and Blackfriars always got caught up, but it wasn't always on time, the paycheck. So it's not like I'm going into a world, in the art world, that I'm not coming from the corporate world where I was just, every Friday I got that check, and I was always, I worried from, always, from paycheck to paycheck, would it be there? And many times I was not the first person paid. The rent got paid, and the electricity, before they turned the electricity on.
Both the theater and the art studio have their version of a garret, right?
Right.
You got to work at it. So we're gonna. What are we gonna see in 5-10 years from now?
Well, I hope. In all actuality, I would love to see that there would be more professional work for me as a designer, even in the theater. Mm-hmm. I'd love to do a show in New York. I still have hopes that Melanie and the Record Man might go somewhere, but it's still kicking around. There are discussions about it. There are New York producers that it's still in their mind. There is a little bit of a kind of a ticking time bomb with that because Melanie is getting older,
at the age, yeah.
And it really only works with her in the show. But she is very interested in still doing it, so we're excited about that. So that might happen, and if it doesn't, that's okay too. But I certainly see. One-man shows of my artwork, my paintings. I'm working on a series of paintings that utilize turn-of-the-century antique jet beading that are immersed into oil paint. And they essentially are black kind of field paintings where at first glance they look like they're all black, but if you get up close to them and you go like, oh, there actually is a lot of very subdued color. I like this matter of fact, I've been working in the theater for the last 10 years, and I really kind of feel like I nailed it with this production of Violet. There's a patina that I really like of this kind of very earthy, darkened, kind of rich, grimy, kind of almost like you're looking. Film can do it by changing the lenses.
Right.
And I'm always amazed at when I see Entertainment Tonight. They show a clip of a film being filmed, and you go, it doesn't look very. It looks because you're seeing it in video. Until you see the film, and then they change the kind of shadows and the things that can be done. So I've been always trying to figure out a way to do that on stage, and I've started to learn how to do it. And just as I'm for Blackfriars, I'm going to continue doing it. But for Blackfriars, I really found a way to how to use color and how to have a limited palette. But I learned something very quickly, not to be too limited. So.
We're limited by time,
yes.
and we want the people at this wonderful fair to continue to have a good time and go do some other things and whatever's planned for that wonderful party, which I know is going to be great.
Well, I know nothing about it, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well,
Thank
I'm sure
you so much.
So I wanted to say thanks a lot for your work over the years, and it's going to be fun. I'm going to see you in a gallery someday and say, I knew that guy when he was in the theater.
That's great. Great to see you.
Good luck. Sure.